Hey, Honors Living Earth. I wanted to take some time to talk to you about the dominance of different alleles. So previously in our genetics unit, we have been considering alleles or different versions of genes that maybe completely dominate over other alleles. That is not always how alleles interact with each other. Sometimes instead of one allele dominating over another, we have these other scenarios happening, like incomplete and codominance. So previously we were operating under simple, what we call Mendelian genetics, where one allele completely dominates over the other. Here we are calling this more non-Mendelian. Traits where we have alleles that might not necessarily completely dominate over another. So go ahead and fill out the top according to the date, period, and assignment number. And we're going to take a look at incomplete dominance and codominance. So let's start with incomplete dominance. We can see our example here is when we have a red flower. We're using the genotype of the red flower to be capital R, and it's crossed with a white flower. We're showing the alleles for the white flower as lowercase r. So when we have two of the R, capital R, red alleles, our flower would be red. If we inherit two of our lowercase alleles, our flower would be white. But our heterozygotes, instead of the red allele completely dominating over the white allele, we actually have a blending of traits. So white blended with red would produce our pink phenotype. So incomplete dominance is when we see blending of traits. And this is one example. So go ahead and read and highlight the blurb about incomplete dominance here. So we can see our heterozygotes are actually not like either of their parents, but a blending of their parents. So it's kind of like what we call an intermediate phenotype or a third phenotype. Okay, so that's incomplete dominance. If we hop over here to codominance, this is co means together. So this ultimately means we have two alleles that are expressed together or alongside each other. So we could say both alleles expressed. So let's take a look at our example here. Sometimes you'll see alleles being written as exponents here. And I'm just going to focus on these exponents and write out the alleles just as capital letters. When we inherit two capital R's, we end up having the phenotype of being a red bull. When we inherit two W alleles, they're both capital, we would end up being a white cow or a bull. If we end up inheriting one of each, we actually end up as this third phenotype, which is called roan, which is actually a cow that has parts both red and white. So it's not a blending, but it's the cow has both red coloration and white coloration, like splotchy or speckled. Okay, so both alleles are expressed in this case. So go ahead and take a moment to read our paragraph about codominance. And another common example of codominance that we'll come back to is seen in human blood typing. So if you've heard of the different blood types, there's a couple main ones. There's A, there's B, there's AB, and there's O. And when we have AB blood type, that's an example of codominance because we have both A and B antigens on the surface of those red blood cells. So we would say that that's an example of codominance because both alleles are contributing to that phenotype. Okay, so go ahead and take a moment to fill in our description, or at least read number 1, our question down here. And I'm going to help you with some answers here. So incomplete dominance and codominance are definitely terms you want to be familiar with. Incomplete dominance is when we have that blending of traits. So we can say, the alleles, a heterozygote inherits, produces a third blended phenotype. So our example is when we cross our red flower with our white flower, if those alleles interact in an incomplete dominant way, we know we produce that third phenotype as pink, a blending. For codominance, the alleles, a heterozygote inherits, are both equally and independently expressed. So our example with the cows up there, we had our red bull cross with our white cow, which produced our third phenotype, which was roan, which we know is both red and white. Okay, so for 2, each situation below, explain how heterozygotes individuals differ in their phenotype from homozygous ones. We could say this is a new blended phenotype that's different from the homozygous one. So we could say blended or even intermediate phenotype. Right, pink is our blended phenotype of the red and the white. And the codominance is a new phenotype, but it is not blended. It's a new phenotype where 2 alleles are expressed equally and independently. Okie doke. So let's take a look at number 3. Go ahead and read our problem for number 3. The first thing we need to do is figure out the genotypes of our parents that are responsible for this cross. So if they're roan cattle, we can take a look at our example up here. We know roan cattle are going to have 1 red allele and 1 white allele. So we can abbreviate that with a capital R and a capital W. And in setting up our Punnett square, we know we need to separate them across and down the side because each parent is going to be donating only one of their two alleles. So go ahead and fill out that cross. And like some of the rules we've talked about earlier, you want to make sure you keep the order of your alleles consistent. So we have been consistently listing the R's before the W's. So make sure you keep that consistent when you're writing out your heterozygotes. So for our answer here, it says they want a phenotypic ratio. So we can say we have 1 red to every 2 roan to every 1 white. We could also express this in percentages. We could say 25% red, 50% roan, 25% white. Okay. Let's take a look at number 4. Go ahead and read the problem. And here our goal is to only have pink and white flowers inside our Punnett square here. Let's take a look at the alleles we're using again. We've been abbreviating the red allele as a capital R and the white allele as a lowercase r. So there's a couple ways we can do this cross. If we only want pink or white as possibilities for our offspring, you could set up a Punnett square that is between a pink flower and a white flower. You can set it up here. Or you could cross a red flower with a white flower. Either of these should produce pink and white, except this one. This one's going to produce 100% of one phenotype. So go ahead and set up a Punnett square with one of these crosses and then summarize your findings down there. When you're ready to move on to the back page, we have some more practice. You should use the same alleles and abbreviations we were using on the front. So if we're dealing with our roan cows, remember that is codominance. And that's where we have our red, our white, or our roan. So use those alleles when you're filling out these diagrams and answering those questions. When you hop down to number 7, this is our pink and red. This is our blending of traits. So this would be our incomplete dominance. Where we have our alleles, capital R is red, lowercase is white, and capital lowercase is pink. Okay. So go ahead and take some time to set up your crosses. You can pause the video. And then let's work through it. So we have our white bull here. We know that is WW. And our roan cow is going to be RW. We split up the alleles. And then we see our alleles are going to produce some offspring. So go ahead and phenotype these cows. And let's answer our questions. 5, a white bull is mated. We did that. Fill in the spaces. We did that. State the phenotype ratio for this cross. So we can say that for every 2 roan, there are 2 white, or we can reduce that ratio fully for a 1-to-1. So for every 1 roan, we're going to get the same number of white cows. Or we could say 50% roan, 50% white. Okay. Suggest how the farmer who owns these cattle could control the breeding so that the herd ultimately consists of red colored cattle only. So if he only wanted red cattle, that would be RR. What do you think he should have them do? Should he have any roan cows present, white cows present? Probably not, because these white or roan are going to have the W, or the white allele, and if that combines with another W, you could produce white or roan or non-red cows. So let's summarize our answer. If red cattle are only wanted, he should make sure the red cattle only breed with other red cattle, not with white or roan. Okay. Great job. Let's take a look at our other cross up here. So we have our, let's fill in what we know first and then kind of work back to our unknown. So our roan cow is going to be our RW. Those alleles split up. And we know the phenotypes of our predicted offspring, so let's fill those in. Red happens when we get 2 R's. Roan is 1 of each. 2 R's, 1 of each. So we can kind of trace back what these gametes of the bull must have been. If this R is being donated from the cow, we know that it's also inheriting another R from the bull. Right, this R and this W combine here. And then here we have another R being inherited from the bull because we have a red over here, R and W. So if the gametes are RR, that means the parent must be red. So let's take a look at 6, read the prompt. We filled out the diagram. And we concluded that that unknown bull must have been a red one, not a white one. Okay. Great job. Let's switch gears to blending of traits where we have incomplete dominance. Go ahead and read your blurb about the plant breeder here. So remember, this is blending of traits. So if we want to fill in this diagram, let's start with the parents down to figure out what our predicted offspring are. Red happens when we have 2 red alleles. Pink happens when we have a heterozygote that has 1 of each. In reproduction, they're only donating 1 of their 2 alleles, so let's separate those, and then we can combine them into our predicted offspring. Go ahead and take a moment to phenotype what each of these would be using our key here. And then let's state our phenotypic ratio. So we have 2 red to 2 pink, but we can reduce that for a 1-to-1 ratio. So we should say 1 red to every 1 pink, or we could say 50% red, 50% pink. Okay, great job. Let me know if you have any questions.